or thorns and things like that may puncture its intestines, and then sometimes may even go to the lungs and puncture that and so on. This brings us to another thing. You'll typically see, you pick up, especially today in most kosher stores, you pick up a piece of meat or a chicken and it will say glatt kosher. What does this word glatt kosher mean?
Smooth.
Glatt is a Yiddish word. It means smooth. Okay? In Hebrew it's called chalak, which is smooth. Well, what was that to do? Smooth kosher? I mean, it sounds like some kind of good bourbon, like smooth. Like, what does that mean? Okay? Of course, like everything else, this term is totally misused today. People will say, this dairy meal is glatt kosher. It's almost used as an industry standard. Like this is like the best, highest level, highest standard of kashrut. But in plain simple words, what glatt kosher is as follows. I said that the lungs are the ones that are typically most prone for problems. What are those problems? There can be minor little holes, but remember, even if that hole has healed itself, that animal was once not kosher, it can never be kosher again. It doesn't, there's no coming back from there. Thus, when you look at examine the lung, typically, and in most cases, I say in most countries, because of the environment or whatever, there'll be cysts and lesions on that lung. Now, those cysts and those lesions are perhaps an indicator that there was once a hole there, and that hole healed itself up. Think of a scar. You have tissue that heals, you have a little scarring. Now, if that's the case, telltale sign. There was a hole here. Once there was a hole here, the whole animal is not kosher. Not just the lung, the whole animal is not kosher. However, there are means and ways to check whether that is indeed a telltale sign of a hole, or it's just an external lesion, an external cyst. And one of the ways of doing it is, rubbing it gently, and of course not too hard with your finger, kind of scratching it off, and if it comes off easily and it doesn't leave, it doesn't leave like a telltale sign of there being something missing there, and all the details, that means that it's kosher. But that can be stretched a little bit. And therefore, when you have a lung that has too many lesions and too many cysts on it, it's not glatt, it's not smooth. It could be kosher, and it could be kosher 100%, based on all the opinions. You can do this, and the several leniencies, and so on. But somebody who wants to, answer to a higher standard, says, I don't want any of that. I want it to be smooth, no problems. Now, the truth be said, today's day and age, to have an absolutely perfect, smooth lung without any whatsoever is very, very difficult to find and very, very expensive. So it would therefore be very expensive. Imagine you have to go through one cow, another cow, especially because of the environment. There are some places where not only it's very hard, it's just impossible. It's not going to happen. So what happens is, obviously the term glatt perhaps has been lowered a little bit in standard. It means, depending what kind of cysts, and I'm not the expert to be able to share with you because I don't know what kind of lesions and so on. But that's where the term comes from, smooth lung. It became an industry standard of saying this is the creme de la creme of kashrut. Okay? So that's as far as that's concerned. Now let's go back to the fish. Remember the question I asked, could you buy fish in the supermarket? And the short answer is most likely yes. Why? Because when you buy a piece of fish, what do you see? It usually comes with the skin. You can tell by the skin if it had scales. That's a good enough sign, halachically, to know that this fish was a kosher fish, especially a piece of salmon, a piece of whitefish, that type of fish, you'll see right away if it has the skin. If it doesn't have the skin, then you don't know, even though you can see according to the grains in the flesh, that's not an absolute sign. That's not absolute proof. However, I do have to caution you that if you're going to buy something in the supermarket, be aware that it's not always so simple. And that's why you typically won't do it. Why not? Because if they're cutting their fish there, they're using the same knives that they're cutting shrimp with, and they're using the same knife that they're cutting non-kosher fish with. That already is a major issue. If one would have no choice, and I'm not the rabbi here to say, let's say you're stuck somewhere, you need to eat a piece of fish, you need some protein, then perhaps you can do that, get your own knife, and lose some of the fish. You have to peel off, like a half an inch of where the knife may have come in contact with and made an incision. Because once the knife makes an incision, some of whatever was in that knife, the heat of it, the pressure of it gets absorbed in the flesh, gets absorbed in the flesh that it cut into. okay, an ingredient that it cut into. So that's just as far as fish is concerned. And as far as birds already covered, typically you're going to see, the what do you call it again? The Jewish recipe doesn't call for, any parakeets. Okay, who decides who wants to eat that? But chicken, typically turkeys. I'll give you an example with the turkey. Interesting. Remember I said about the birds and the characteristic of the animals of why Hashem. It's interesting that although Hashem does not give us signs for the kosher versus the non-kosher birds, yet it seems quite evident from those birds that are not kosher that they all have something very strongly in common, and that is that they're birds of prey.
Yeah.
And thus, any bird of prey is for sure off limits. For sure, no question.
Absolutely.
No question.
Vulture, hawks.
For sure. And that's what it said. To the extent, listen to this interesting thing, and this does not in any way apply to all Jews. In fact, it doesn't apply to any Jews, unless somebody voluntarily wants to accept this upon himself. But there was a great rabbi, Kabbalist, Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz, known by his pen name, the Shalah. Shalah stands for the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, the 2 tablets of the covenant, which is the title of his works that he wrote. So the Shalah, legend has it that the Shalah saw, he once witnessed a turkey, a wild turkey, attacking another bird, another animal. And therefore for his descendants, for his family exclusively, this is a voluntary thing, he forbade the consumption of turkey. So there are some people in the world, they don't eat turkey. But that's very few, and that has to be by choice almost, because turkey is kosher.
And it only, I believe it only applies to wild turkey.
Again, you could say maybe wild turkeys.
Yeah, it only applies to wild turkey.
But I'm trying to. Now I also remember when I was training to learn how to slaughter here's another good example. To slaughter the chickens, we went to a live chicken market, which I don't know if it really exists anymore. This was in Brooklyn, in some area that it still existed. To train.
Of course.
And the shochet, the rabbi, who was a well-trained expert. I mean, years. He had years and years of experience. In fact, we had the opportunity to see him in action doing the Rebbe's chicken on the eve of Yom Kippur.
Nice.
Okay? So that was his merit. Okay? So he would slaughter for a certain doctor or something, duck. Okay? And they had ducks there. But he would inspect the beak.
Yeah.
The yellow versus the pink beak. And I said, what was the difference? I mean, a duck is a duck. It's the same thing. And he said, no. This tradition from the town he came, from the city he came, that they only ate, I believe it was the yellow beaks.
Yeah.
And the pink ones, no. If it wasn't exactly yellow, and just to show you to what extent we follow tradition, you're like, come on, it's the same ducks. They all breed from each other. The yellow beaks, that was the only one. Now, it could be because that's the only thing that was available there. That's fine. But that was to what extent Kabbalah of this tradition, the reception of this tradition, the passing on, applies to the laws of kashrut. So you see, the laws of kashrut are not so simple. Now, once you've done with all of that, now we go to extracting the blood, which is a whole, separate subject in itself, which one day we'll get to. The reason why fish is a non-issue, because when it comes to the laws of slaughtering, it only applies to animals and birds. Fish, their extraction from the water is considered to be their death, even if it's still moving. And therefore, you don't need anyone to slaughter it, so you can buy it anywhere. Frozen fish or anything, it can be mass produced, and that's why fish is a lot more, affordable, right? Imagine they had to slaughter the fish like they slaughter that. That would be, it would be a little messy when it comes to the wallet, But that's because, look, it's pricier. Remember, what goes into a piece of kosher meat, okay? Just to have the people who are trained to slaughter, then to check it. Then also, I forgot to mention, to extract the fats that are not permissible. That's for a totally another reason, which has to do with the sacrifices and the offerings in the Holy Temple, and the gid hanasha, the thigh bone, and so on. Then you have the blood that needs to be extracted. Okay, then you need to have the supervisor. So much goes into it but I'll give you another good example, by the way, and that's why when it comes to kosher chickens, you're going to find something in kosher chickens that you won't, which comparing it to non-kosher chickens, the sad reality is that kosher chickens are usually a lot less clean in terms of the feathers and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
what is the reason for that? What is the reason for that? What happens is, once they slaughter the chicken, remember the body's still warm, right? It's still warm. It's very warm. It's hot. It was a living thing a few seconds ago. Okay, so immediately in the non-kosher process, it's thrown into
Boiling water.
which further softens the skin. Then it goes through a plucking machine.
Yeah.
Plucking machine, if you see them, it's basically like a bunch of rubber fingers, big fat rubber fingers, and it plucks out everything, and you get a smooth, clean skin. That's it. All the feathers are out.
that
With a kosher chicken, you cannot do that. Why can't you do that?
You put it in
Because
ice water.
the moment you put it into hot water, you have cooked it.
Yeah.
The moment you cooked it, you have cooked all the blood into it. No matter what you do now, you ain't extracting that blood that has been absorbed right now, at least in the top layer of the flesh, and therefore the only thing you could throw it into, it has to be clean, is cold water, freezing cold water. The moment you throw it into freezing cold water, not only you haven't softened the skin, now you even hardened it more. So the kosher chickens go through a double or maybe even triple process of plucking, 3 plucking machines, and that's the best that it can do.
Yeah.
Okay? And then it still has to get salted. So it's interesting how you see the kosher process is totally different, but this is what Hashem wants us to. Hashem wanted us and wants us to eat in a restricted manner. In a restricted manner. In other words, people go, well, why all these laws? Obviously, it's for our benefit. I don't have the answer, but I do know the fact. And it's very interesting. And here's an interesting thing. And we've all experienced it, okay? Unless somebody is absolutely eccentric. When you go to a competent doctor, for example, you have something, you're not feeling well, whatever, and the doctor prescribes something. Unless you heard that there's a controversy, it's oxycodone, I don't want to get hooked on that. But I'm talking about the doctor says, listen, this is what you need to do. And you go for a second opinion, another doctor who's been trained perhaps in another school, but again, under the same influence, tells you, no, this is what you need to do in order to get better. You do it, even though you don't understand it.
Exactly.
You don't go first to medical school for 10 years or 6 years to say, let me first understand what's going to happen. God forbid, I'm sorry to say, you might be dead by then. You know what I mean? The bacteria may just totally consume you, or whatever the illness is. You follow the doctor. The doctor knows. In this case, the doctor is Hashem. The doctor is God. And he's the best doctor because he made us. And he connected that soul to us. And he said, listen, and this is a very important thing, it's not because it's unhealthy. Because if it was unhealthy, then statistics had to show that from the billions of people that live in the world, they're dropping like flies. And that the Jews are the greatest and biggest population. That's not the case. So obviously it tells us this is something unique. This is something special for us. This is a special diet that Hashem prescribed for us because He knows what's best for us in terms of our connection of our body and soul together and a harmonious flow of that material and spiritual energy together. This is what you need to eat, and this is what you need not to eat. So that basically sums up the topic of this week's conversation. Go ahead, any questions?
I had a question.
Sure.
You're not supposed to eat cheese and meat, but what about the birds? They're not mammals.
Okay, so first of all, we're not. That's a whole That's a whole subject in itself. Mixing meat and milk. But since you asked the question, I'll answer. In the Torah, it says only specifically the mammals. However, it's extended also to the chicken, because typically what you do see in the Torah, and actually it connects to this Parsha somewhat, over here you see a very strong parallel between meat of animals and the flesh of the fowl. What's that? In terms of what I just described, the shechita, the slaughtering. So they're very strongly connected. Mm-hmm. Since they're very strongly connected, therefore the sages saw it fit to put on the same restrictions. Because if one would have been allowed to eat chicken, okay, have a good chicken breast with a good slice of cheese, they would come to mix that up, and that line perhaps was more easily crossed to coming to eat meat and milk. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's basically the premise of the reason for why it's forbidden. Okay? In fact, it says it very clearly that if anybody suggests that mixing, like for example, chicken meat with milk is prohibited biblically is transgressing, because that's not true. That's basically propagating a falsehood. It's rabbinically prohibited, it's restricted, and I gave you the general reason why. That ultimately leads to a biblical imperative, a biblical precept, which is that we are obligated to follow the words of the ordained sages, which have a direct tradition back to Moshe, and that is the case in this case. You know, the Talmudical sages and so on. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Hey, remember, we talk about the laws of kashrut. We can sit here the next several months with the little that I know. Okay? There's so much to talk about. But the idea is as follows, and I want to make a suggestion. The idea is one needs to always remember that whenever it comes to the observance of any mitzvah in the Torah, especially such a fundamental mitzvah, such a fundamental precept as keeping kashrut, it is important always to gradually and therefore effectively grow in your observance. You cannot go, even the best race car cannot go from 0 to 60, from 0 to 90 in a split second. You know, you can go to second point, 2 seconds point, 3 seconds point, but you cannot do it. So you need to go step by step in your observance, okay? For example, today, and this is something very important, I spoke to people that I know that for lunch they go basically, but they don't eat meat, they only will take fish, and they only will be salads. And I suggest to them, and I'm using this just as an example, hey, I think it's time to take it to the next level. Because remember, even if it's salads, those salads were cut on cutting boards that they also cut.
Probably got bacon or...
Go to a kosher restaurant.
No, so there in this particular area, there's no kosher restaurants, but definitely they should be more, I should say, more vigilant about what they eat and what they not eat. You know, like for example, even if they're eating out, but not always eating out and saying, well, I'm only eating fish, you don't know what kind of oil was used. If it's animal-based, it's not kosher. You know
Yeah, but what happened also the pan. You know, you don't know what was on the pan before the fish.
Correct, and that's why what I strongly suggest, just to start as a starting point, and you'll see it'll make a tremendous difference. Just to become familiarized with the various kosher symbols, the main ones, okay? And that at least tells you that when you look at a product, and if it doesn't say dairy, then you know it's not dairy. And especially if it says parv, which means neutral, it's for sure not dairy and not meat. If it says meat, it's meat. If it doesn't say anything, typically it means that it's not dairy nor meat. It doesn't. I don't know why sometimes they do it. They don't write parv. But the point being is, you start getting into the habit, and you'll be surprised. There are so many kosher products. So many kosher products out there.
In your regular
Publix, just the OU, the OK, you know, which is the typical kosher symbols, thousands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to say, just, you know, it's not conservatively, but at least half of the store.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Buy the meat at
Absolutely. And that's why, okay, now of course if you're talking about raw vegetables, raw fruits and everything else, you got no issue at all. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
But I'm talking about in terms of observance, and this is once you get into the habit, and you say, well, but let's say for right now I'm not buying kosher this. So what's the purpose? Well, the purpose is, first of all, you know, imagine somebody who doesn't necessarily keep the best diet. And you go, well, why don't you exercise? Well, anyway, I don't eat healthy. And why do you have to smoke like a chimney? What's the difference? I'm not eating healthy anyway. Of course, any rational person would say, look, you got one vice.
Don't extend
You don't
it.
have to extend it, you know what I mean, and over-exaggerate with every other one. There are things that you can do that you can adapt and what's the word? And train yourself to live healthier in, whether it's doing more exercise or this. So one doesn't override the other.
So
And
is it healthier to eat kosher meat?
I cannot make the statement that it's healthier to eat kosher meat in terms of physical health, because that would go back to what I said in the beginning. That would suggest that somehow kosher meat is healthier. Do I believe that in the long term and ultimately it's healthier? Yes, because if that's what Hashem wants me to do, that's what's in my best interest, and that's what's better for me as a Jew. But in terms of taking it to a laboratory and saying, is this healthier?
According to what you're saying, it's all tradition, right?
It's law.
Right, but
Which
it's
is
tradition.
tradition is only in terms of what I can and
Kosher
cannot
food
eat.
is tradition. I just
Yeah, well, it's
That's
tradition by virtue of the fact that it's Judaism, but it's a fundamental staple of Judaism, legally speaking, where, I mean, what and what not we can eat. I said the tradition aspect is that, technically speaking, there may be some animals out there that technically should be kosher, and because of tradition, we don't consume them. In other words, the Torah didn't say you have to consume. Remember the words the Torah said? This is what you may consume. That's what I use the word tradition for.
And
As
I'm
far
saying
as
it's more healthier because of the way, for instance, they slaughter the chicken.
Yes.
So it's healthy. Because in the regular world,
Big hen,
They-
big chicken.
they
Okay.
slaughter
Yeah,
the
yeah.
chicken like a
Yeah.
crazy person, even though I don't even get into those
I
seeds.
would
But,
say the
right?
following. I believe that there's a lot of merit to what you're suggesting, but we have to be very careful not to lean on that as the reason for why we do it.
Right,
That
the
is
reason we do
not
it
the
is
motive.
Hashem
The
said-
motive
Yes.
is because it's kosher.
Okay.
The kosher laws. Because again, if that motive was exclusively the reason, if that reason was the exclusive factor, then most of the world should be dying as we speak because they don't eat kosher meat.
Right.
It's obvious that it's something that's exclusive for us, for those who have this Jewish soul, for this connection. It's almost in a way, you pull up in the gas station. I know this is oversimplifying it. But you pull in the gas station, okay? And you have 3 grades of gas in any typical gas station. And it jumps by 60, 70 cents. I mean, it can jump by almost literally 30, 40%. And you're like, whoa, well, I should get a better gas. It costs more, it must be better. Well, I'm not Jewish, I'm saying that. But it costs more, it must be better. And anybody that knows anything about cars says, you got a very simple car. You got a regular, run-of-the-mill car. Don't waste your money. In fact, you might be doing more harm than good. You put in the regular gas. Now, if you have a high-performance vehicle and you're putting in regular gas, you're killing the car. First of all, you're undermining the reason why you bought the car. You bought it for the high performance. It's not going to perform high. And number 2, it's going to get clogged up. It's too sensitive for this gas, for this cheap gas to go in. But for my car, my regular car, it's perfect. And that's maybe a good example. It's fine. All the meat that's out there, I'm not talking about the stuff that they're cutting corners and healthy. I'm saying meat is meat. Now, some argue you shouldn't eat meat. That's a separate, discussion, the whole topic in itself. But the idea of this being healthy or unhealthy, no, this is fine. When you're on a different level of performance, not because you're better than anyone, but because Hashem put you there, not because you chose to be there, because you were chosen to be there, this is what you need. This is the car comes and it says, please, this is the fuel you need to
The
put
owner's
in
manual.
This vehicle. That's what it says in the owner's manual. And this is the owner's manual.
Okay, so Rabbi, so when they do the whole thing, we're talking about the place where they actually cut the meat and they do the whole ritual, whatever it is that they do. At the end of the day, who does it? The rabbi has to bless it?
It's not a matter of blessing it.
No, just follow what I'm asking here. So, because I'm going somewhere with this. So, what do they do? What do they do at the place where they...
First of all, it doesn't have to be done in any specific place. It can be done anywhere, technically. It just happens to be more, hygiene and sanitary for it to be done in a slaughterhouse, not in someone's backyard.
Right.
But it can be done in your backyard.
Yeah.
It's just meant it to be legal, okay?
Right,
But the
besides
point
it being
is that
kosher
it needs
done
to
that
be
way,
it
what-
needs to be ritually slaughtered
Right.
in a manner that fits the criteria, the legal criteria, according to Jewish law, whatever goes into it. There are 5 main areas that need to be covered, 5 main aspects of the slaughtering, and of course it needs to be somebody that's well trained, somebody that has been certified and ordained, just like you wouldn't want to go to a doctor and say, no problem, it's my first time doing it, but I read the book, I can do the surgery.
Okay.
Obviously,
Do they have to be a rabbi or not necessarily?
Yeah, right. That's what I want
To be a rabbi.
Do they have to be?
No.
There has to be someone who's trained in that area. So that means
Certified.
it could certified in. This is a very specific.
Right.
I want to
The
say
reason I'm asking
specialty.
it because a friend of mine is working for some kind of company like that, and he's not Jewish, but the owner, one of the owners, does some things that he shouldn't be doing because he's not either kosher kind of guy,
He's not certified.
certified, whatever, and he's still doing it. And my friend says to him, "You're not supposed to do that because you're supposed to have the guy that's doing that, whatever." And he said,
So he's a fraud.
"Okay,
And
so
he is defrauding people.
Okay,
and
right.
that is
So
at the
this
worst level because people are buying. Now, the real culprit there, and I don't know who you're referring to and so on, but the real culprit in such a case, as you're describing it, is actually the supervising body or the one that is signing off as saying this is kosher. See, when I buy a product, I'm not there in the factory.
right."
So I'm relying, and that's why you only get from a reputable supervising agency and so on, because I'm relying on the rabbi, and that's why it has to be somebody that has checked everything out, is aware. I'm not aware of all the issues that may arise. I'm not aware of all the details. I'm not aware of all the factors that may play a role in it. You know, what I gave you now is general, so superficial, you can't really do anything with it. You can't take this to the bank. So what I'm saying is,
So like if people are eating that food, whatever,
they're eating non-kosher. That's
But
the
they don't
same,
know it.
right? But that's the same.
That's
but-
fraud.
That's no.
But that's not between them and Hashem. That's between
bet-
that guy and Hashem.
That's between that guy and Hashem, and that sadly it's them. And to the extent, remember what I said before, and that's why one has to be very, very, very careful when it comes to this. Not because somebody said, "Oh, it's kosher." Oh, fine. No, you don't take a chance. Why? Because remember what I said. Based on the words of the Ramban, it's becoming part of you. And that, sadly, is something you can never get rid of. You know what I'm saying? So who wants to find out one day, I'm buying from this guy and he's been defrauding me and it wasn't kosher, I'm eating not kosher all these years. So basically part of me is not kosher. You know what I'm saying? What I'm trying to say is that this person is doing a fraud. This person is doing something on a level that's beyond, you know, almost coming back from. You know what I'm saying?
Actually, this is really interesting because I think that's a real interesting point. The whole thing about what we use, what we are, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a whole.
Shut it off.
Sweetie, I'm in
Call.
class. Can I call you back? Okay.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Very interesting.